This module builds on the previous module, Developing an Argument, Persuasive Writing. In that video, you learned how to develop a simple exposition essay by presenting a series of arguments in support of a thesis statement. In this video, we will introduce you to a more critical type of writing, in which you will incorporate counter-arguments and/or present challenges to ideas. When you are arguing for and against ideas, you are usually writing a discussion essay. And it is this type of essay that is required in many assignments at university. You should always check with your lecturer or tutor to make sure you understand what is required for any particular assignment. In order to understand how you can write a discussion essay, we need to look first at the three main ways of developing arguments. We have already looked at the exposition essay, which presents a series of arguments to promote and support a particular position. The exposition is one-sided in that it doesn't include counter-argument or contradictory evidence. This is the type of essay you might have written at high school, or which might be suitable at university for shorter essays, such as essays written under exam conditions. Another way of presenting an argument is to discuss different perspectives related to a particular issue with a view to resolving this issue. This multi-sided type of argument is called a discussion. A discussion argument allows you to more fully explore the complexity of ideas and positions that you encounter in the literature. The third way of arguing is one-sided, like the exposition, but more critical. We will look at this challenge type of argument later in this module. These three types of arguments are the building blocks for an essay. They can be combined in different ways to support an essay's overarching thesis statement. The overarching structure of the essay, that is, the combination of the building blocks, usually takes the form of a discussion for more complex and critical essays, or an exposition for simpler, shorter essays. Let's use the essay question we introduced in the previous module to explore this multi-sided and more critical type of essay. This essay question asks you to consider whether teachers are still needed in the internet age, especially because a wealth of information can be found using search engines such as Google. You can pause the video if you need more time to read. We saw in the previous video that there are a number of positions you might take in response to this essay question. These positions can be placed along a continuum, as shown here. At one end of the continuum is a position that strongly agrees with the question. Yes, we do still need teachers. At the other end is a position that strongly disagrees with the question. No, we no longer need teachers. Between these positions are those that both agree and disagree in various ways. Here we will assume the position that teachers are still needed to help students learn essential skills. This will become the thesis statement for our essay as a whole. In a discussion essay, you will present a series of arguments to support your overarching thesis statement. These arguments are organised around the different ideas you will have read in the literature, that is, your analysis. The arguments in our sample essay outline presented here are organised around selecting relevant information, critical thinking, and collaboration between students. Pause the video if you need more time to read. The first argument argues quite strongly that teachers are still needed to help students select relevant information from within the vast amounts of information they find on the internet. Notice that this first building block in the essay is an exposition, or a one-sided argument, because it does not include any counter-argument. However, for the second and third arguments, there is some convincing evidence both for and against, and this range of evidence has been included. Nonetheless, for both of these arguments, the evidence on the for side is seen to outweigh the evidence on the against side, so the argument balances out as for, as indicated by the arrow. If the evidence against for this particular argument were more convincing than the evidence for, obviously we would need to change our position and adjust our thesis statement for the whole essay accordingly. We see then that this discussion essay is composed of one exposition argument and two discussion arguments. Let's take a closer look inside one of these discussion arguments. Here is how one writer has developed argument 2. Pause the video so you can read the text. Argument 2 suggests that teachers are still needed to teach their students critical thinking skills. This general idea is introduced at the beginning of the paragraph in a topic sentence. Next, two separate pieces of evidence are brought in to support this argument. Firstly, that students need help to distinguish fake news, and secondly, that search engines need to be treated with some caution. Notice how the writer has included the relevant sources here. The writer then turns to the other side of the argument, which is that some of the research shows that students do have the capacity to develop these critical thinking skills more or less independently. The writer again provides sources to support this. Finally, the writer resolves this particular issue by arguing against the second perspective and giving their reasons. Let's now turn to the final way of developing an argument, the challenge. Unlike the discussion argument that first presents one side, then the other side, and finally chooses the most convincing side, some arguments are set up with a view to defeating a particular position. Let's return to our essay question to illustrate this. In considering this question, you might have identified an assumption that you think is being made. That is, that all students are equally familiar with computers, information technology, and the internet. You might like to start your essay by challenging the idea of young people as digital natives, as they have been referred to in the literature, and you would do this in a challenge argument. Here is an example. Pause the video to read the text. A challenge argument starts with the position to be argued. Here it is the idea that students are in fact digital natives. The writer then presents their rebuttal arguments, that is, why they don't agree with the claim that students are digital natives, and they provide evidence from the literature to support their rebuttal. In this example, there are two rebuttal arguments. First, not all students are equally at home with the new technologies. Second, there is difference between the use of these technologies for academic rather than personal or social purposes. Finally, the writer puts forward their own position, that is, that teachers are still needed to teach diverse students how to use the new technologies for academic purposes. They can then continue to develop their arguments in the remainder of the essay. In this module, we have moved beyond persuasive writing in which you develop a one-sided argument and use sources to back up this argument, to a more critical and multi-sided way of arguing. It is important to keep in mind that critical writing is also persuasive, and persuasive writing itself is built on an analysis of ideas that in turn relies on descriptive information.